Now, the implementation of this, where you're actually going out and doing the work, is done by the other decision makers, not you. Not you. Some of that implementation will be sending somebody to the banks, start softening them up for financing. Some of that implementation will be interviewing new employees, because when this thing gets on the ground, or comes to fruition, we're going to need more people. But they're doing it, you're not. You've got to be focused follow-up at other levels, because now that level of people, to the extent you have that many employees, is now overseeing another level. So, but there has to be followed up at other levels and focused follow-up at decision-makers level. So in other words, again, once a quarter, once every month, and once every 2 weeks, whenever I meet with them, I follow up and say, well, first of all, they present it to me, and I ask questions. Charlie Solomon used to say, you always ask the questions of the projects that we didn't finish, or the projects that were not done by the timeline, deadlines. I intuitively, I wouldn't have to read, I just knew. I only ask questions when things don't get done. I intuitively knew, because I had a feel in a macro sense, what would get done. I also knew their strengths and their weaknesses. I mean, that's part of being a leader. I mean, you got to know the strengths and the weaknesses. But Charlie was working around to make an acquisition, whatever we do, and then the two things that he didn't do on the way to the airport, I said, well, what about A and what about B? He goes, well, I haven't done A or B yet. And then he would be silent. And then he'd get my bags out of the trunk, and I'd start walking towards the thing, and then I'd turn around and say, when do you think we're going to get A and B done? And he said, as soon as I can humanly possibly do it. I said, good. I'll talk to you. Then beat him up, and then he'd go home, and I tell us his widow, the widow of Soliday, as they call her now, he come home and says, he didn't ask one thing about all the good things I did. He said, all he asked me was the two things I didn't have time to do yet. He didn't ask me how much money we made. Do you realize, in all the years I've been in business, almost 24, super successfully for 15 at least, nobody's ever asked me how much money I made on a project, transaction, no bank. They wondered, but nobody's ever asked. And yet, that's all you guys worry about. Not one swing banker has ever asked me in all the time that I've been doing this, did you make money on Bow Valley? Did you make money on this? Did you make money on that? The first year I was in business, $50 million in revenue. Some of you've already heard this. Nobody's ever asked me how much money I made on $50 million. Nobody. And I've talked to tens of thousands of people since then. I made 90 grand on 50 million. The 50 million is all they remember. 50 million. You won't even remember the 90 grand probably a month from now. You'll remember the 50 million. I'm still riding that 50 million horse. Actually, it was 50,540,000. With one employee. Nobody. I think this is the first time I've ever written it either. That's what I made. Nobody ever asked me if I made money on my government contracts. Nobody ever asked me if I made money with Leggett and Abilene. Nobody. Yet that's all most people, virtually all people, focus on. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said it before, the key to super success, high performance, is equity, not revenue. Equity. And what I call transactions, what you will call doing it over and over and over again, replicating it. Replicating it. The reason there's 4 or 5 people in this room that would like me to be their partners, none of those 4 or 5 ever asked me if I made any money on any of my deals. He lives in a castle. He's got 10 cars. He's got more net worth, and his wife's got more. The value of his wife's furs are bigger than most net worth, the average net worth of this room. They're not even throwing any of her jewelry in. I mean, nobody asked, because perception is reality. All you know, or you're almost positive, I got a lot more money than this group. That's pretty safe to say. Well, that's a fact. We don't have to. That's not a question mark. And it'll be the same, and it's the same at all levels. People always perceive you to be more successful than you are when you're at my end of the continuum. That's why when I got them to work on the castle, I got them into their knickers 3 months, said, you're going to finish the castle this year. And they did. Of course, then they were all proud of themselves. They changed their brochures around. They said, you know, one of the biggest construction projects in the history of Scotland, done by Webster Patella, and 216 days from... They changed their whole marketing around. Their unique selling proposition changed. Yeah. They've made tons of money since then. Now they become so big, the boathouse and the chapel I'm building at the castle, I'm using somebody else. They're too big now. Webster won't even talk to me. He's big. You know, so I got picked number 4 company in the area. I said, it's your lucky day. It's your lucky day. So we're doing, you know. But I mean, perception is reality. And you will find, just as the way you look, all these things are part of the package. Not sharing your doubts, acting positively, acting enthusiastically, all are part of it. Okay, so you follow up with the decision-maker level, so you follow up with them, and they follow up with the level below. And then, under execution number 10, I mean, you focus your people in a laser beam method. This is the most important thing in their life. It's the most important thing to their income. It's the most important of anything short of death. This is the most important thing. And they will perform like that. If you act like it's the most important thing, they will perform like it is. If you act like it's willy-nilly just one of the deals, guess what? That's exactly how they act. That's exactly how they act. It was important to the employees of Great Western Resources that we were the fastest growing energy company when thousands of companies were going out of business every year. It became important to them. That's one of the reasons we were able to maintain it for so many years. You lead from the front, and you never second-guess your employees. Now, during these critical paths and all these times, trust me, people are going to make mistakes. One of the reasons they're going to make mistakes is because you've never given them the opportunity to do this before. That's not their fault. That's the boss's fault. The Verdiers, you know, we're talking about, and they didn't talk about them. We did a little bit at dinner, but I mean, not everybody that they gave all this responsibility did everything 100% right. But guess what? I've got another saying, but you gotta see. But they did it good enough. Perfection equals paralysis. We got we got some doctors, but they're not. What kind of doctor are you? So that's not life. You're not life, death. Okay. Doc, you're a life, death doctor. Okay, we got no life, death guys here. Okay. It's good enough. In fact, Dr. Job, who's working on my shoulder from the Curl and Job Clinic here locally, and I said, just do it good enough, but don't do it like Art Wall, the golfer, that you had to do 5 times. That wasn't good enough, the 5 times one. Good enough, I mean, just fix it good enough. Mike for Jim Mosby. Mike? Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
Jim?
In regard to the 11 steps here, I'm sure number 10 hasn't changed from when you started, but 1 through 9,
yeah.
How have you kind of refined this plan from when you started based on your 50,000 decisions? What are some of the components that you've either added or taken out, or it hasn't changed at all?
I really haven't. well, the next plan, the 4-step plan that you've got, okay, last but not least, I mean, let me get finished up here and then I'll answer your question. So you never second guess your employees. They know when they make a mistake. And, you know, and it's difficult sometimes because when you really get irritated with somebody, you know, you want to whip them, but that doesn't do much good. Other than gives you maybe some kind of sadistic satisfaction. But I mean, that doesn't work. They know when, if you're dealing with, if you have good people, they know they made a mistake. So, but you can't second guess them. You can't, all you do is say next time. Next time we'll do it this way. Will. You're part of the problem. Okay. And then obviously, or not obviously, the 11th is you continue to reevaluate and monitor the process continuously. To reevaluate. You're not reevaluating. Those top decision makers that came up with that critical path that we had here are continuing to monitor. If you got to continue to monitor it and continue to reevaluate it, something's wrong. Either you're getting your fingers in the business where you shouldn't, because you're a control freak still, or you got doofuses working for you, or a combination of the two. Okay, now and I'm going to answer Jim's question, but are there any questions on this so far? Okay, next is, in your packet, should be one of these. Now this is what I do now. This is the short form, quantum leap, shove it down their throat method. This is the jump starter. This is when it's 5 minutes to 2 and there's just you and another of the opposite sex sitting at the bar. I like that. That's a new one. Yeah. This is the time to get down to business, as they say. Okay. Now this is what I do. Now, this is the 4-step super action plan. One, I decide what the outcome I want. Very simple. Outcome. And the desired completion. Not the desired completion date, but the desired completion. Okay? Very, you know, if we're going to the moon, landing a guy on the moon was my outcome. The desired completion is the infrastructure to get it done. Simple terms. 2 sentences. 1 sentence. Okay. Then the commitment that I'm willing to make. My pay, price to action. George Verdier talked about it. And he said once he got over that hurdle, it was like feces through a goose. I mean, it was easy. And it is easy once you get over that hurdle. But for some of you, that's a big hurdle. It's like, what are the 3 hardest things? Kiss a girl leaning away from you. Climb a fence. I forget now. Some text is bullshit. I forget what it is. But I mean, it's hard. It's a big hurdle. Okay. Now, I figure out how it's going to be measured and who's going to measure it periodically. Normally, that's not me. That's somebody else. So somebody in my staff, I'll say, Tim Harris, you're the one that's going to do this. Ed, you're the one that's going to do this. And then I figure out in my own mind how often there should be benchmarks that I should measure against. Whoops. And the next, in my mind, plan how I'm going to modify it, because normally it's modified within the first few days, any plan that you come up with. And I'd look about how I'm going to change the plan as necessary, and then I make a commitment, and I built into my staff how they're going to continue to measure the modified plan. Because by definition, if your plan's not a modified plan, then you did something wrong. All plans should be modified plans. All plans should be modified plans. Now, this is the pay price to action. This has been called by some of the attendees, especially the ones that I whip in Scotland. Some of these people that are mentioned here, by the way, Burl put this together. This was the group that Burl was with. Did she? Yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter. Okay. CFO, Snooker Doofus. We had a lot of doofuses in that group. Anyway, what do you... Pardon? Yeah. We've got things that we want in life. We want more revenue, higher net worth, 3-hour marathon. That'd be slow for our runner in here. Where's our runner? That'd be slow, but for the average doofus, that you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Lose 20 pounds, be well-adjusted, have well-adjusted children. We all have problems, but we don't want to solve all our problems. It depends on the cost to solve or pay price to action. We want to be wealthy, problem, but we don't want to pay the price to action. Doctors say I should lose 10 or 15 pounds. I'd have to stop drinking because I don't exercise as much as I used to, and I'm not willing to do that. I don't give a shit. Not that important to me. We know, for those of us that are overweight, we know what it takes. For those of us in our business, again, if I go to the yellow pages, I can tell you, I can find somebody that's beating your ass in business, whipping you like a dog, no problem. Because they're willing to pay the price to action. Either it may be you got to be away from your spouse or your significant other more than you want. It may be a lot of things. But some people have said this is the most critical and crucial element of everything I say. And everything else comes secondarily to this. It's what you're willing to pay to get it done. And remember, you've got 2 checkbooks in life, emotional and financial. Most of you can't write emotional checks because you got no suds in there. You don't have a reservoir. And because financially you are where you are, you can't write financial checks. So where are you? You're in a deep hole with no ladder to get out. That's where you are. Yeah, screwed. This, and I thought about it, and this probably can be called, maybe not the most important, but one of the real building blocks of being a high-performance person. Because high-performance people do what makes you nauseous. They're willing to pay that price. They're doing, as we talked about the comfort zone, they're walking up there on that 2x12 between buildings 50 floors up. They're willing to suck up their pantyhose and do whatever it takes, whenever, no matter what, time of the year, Cinco de Mayo, doesn't make a damn. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, there's just not a whole bunch of people out there willing to do that. And if you are, that's great. If you're not, at least you know. And you didn't go to your grave wishing and hoping. As I told you before, there was a gentleman, he happened to be a Hispanic, at a deal that I was the keynote, and he got up and he said, Mr. Peña, he says, I'm glad that I was here, but I'm not willing to pay that price to action. At least I'm not going to kick myself in the ass the rest of my life. I'm 41 years old or whatever he was. That's great. Because as I said earlier, this isn't for everybody. It sure as hell isn't. And you don't have to take the whole program, like cod liver oil down your throat. I know, and the reason why I don't just deal with high-performance Fortune 50 CEOs is because even if you take part of the deal, you're going to be significantly better off in your business, or in your life for that matter. And that's not a rationalization by me, that's the truth. We've heard from 4 or 5 or 6 high-performance people that have made my stuff work exponentially. I could have had 300 that have only used it 10 or 20% and still changed their business, improved their profits. They're not necessarily growing exponentially, but they're growing, and their business is a hell of a lot faster than they were. The pay price to action. Now just think in your own mind, when you're putting your plan together, what you're willing to pay. Are you willing to and it's not necessarily work 20 more hours a week, and it's not necessarily work Saturdays and Sundays. Are you willing to do whatever it takes? That's the real question, because you know what it takes. When I sit down with people and we talk about growing their business, and I say, well, what do you think it takes? And they tell me, and guess what? Normally they're right. I got to get rid of my brother-in-law. I got to divorce my wife. I got to do this. I got to change bankers, but I went to school with my banker. I got to stop hanging around with the doofuses I was in high school with. And they go through this list of things, 80 things. I don't have any work. I said, yeah, well, let's just prioritize these 80. Because down deep inside, you know. It's no secret. See, you know, unlike some of these other gurus that come around and say there's secrets, I didn't know they were called secrets till I got in this business. There are no secrets. There's no original thought.
Secrets are worth more.
Yeah, I understand that. Secrets are, but I mean, this is all, you know, common sense stuff, if you know. And now I quantify it, and I've codified it over my career. But I mean, there's a lot of guys that have done just as well, if not better than I have. They're just not out talking about it. There's not many of them. And but you know if you can come up with a list of things that you should be doing different, and the reason why you're not doing them is because of that pay price to action. You're not willing to pay that price. And with my Latino kids that I'm working with, most of which went to Harvard, I mean, we sit down, and these guys are bright, you know. They have no experience, but they're intellectually bright. And they know, you know, they have they think they know some of the reasons why they act they do, the way they act, the rationale behind it. And in a lot of cases, they do understand. But because of the conditioning they've gone through, not the educational part, but where they've lived and how they've been raised, some of these things that I'm talking about doing are very difficult. And I just use them as an example, but I mean, nobody in this room falls into any different category than that. I mean, my daughter came up to me yesterday when I got home and said, Daddy, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, why? Because whenever she asks me, what am I doing tomorrow, it ain't because there's a reason. And I said, well, what is it? And she says, well, I want you to come to my soccer game, and you haven't seen a soccer game all year. And we're running out of weeks. And I said, well, I can't come tomorrow, honey. I'm going to be giving a seminar. And I said, but you ask me again, and I'll make sure that I get to one game before the season's over. Now, that's my pay price to action. And I don't have any Jewish guilt, because the reason I say Jewish is because the Jews put guilt on themselves better than anybody, you know. But I have no Jewish guilt about it. I don't feel bad about it. It's a decision that I made long time ago, and the kids know that. You know, my two boys, one has a miniature Ferrari and one has a miniature Porsche. You know, and they know that all that stuff they have, and like Derek says, I said, why don't you practice on the golf course, or the golf thing that I put in the backyard? Dad, when you have as much as we do, you take it for granted. I mean, we're spoiled. This is Derek, my 11-year-old, saying. They probably won't play on the golf course I'm building. I'll probably be the only one to play. When Hoffman comes over, I mean, they're not going to play. But they know when I'm gone, and it's provided all this. Now, you could say, well, they would rather have you home because happiness is like that last doofus question on the thing. Well, I don't buy that shit. I don't. Because if you don't think money can buy happiness, you ain't shopping in the right place, as my wife would say. You're just not. I've been rich and I've been dirt damn poor. And there is no comparison. It's not like even black and white. It transcends black and white. I mean, when I sit up there overlooking the Pacific Ocean, picking my nose, drinking a beer in the afternoon, going off hitting golf balls onto my putting green, I mean, there ain't no comparison. Well, don't you not like to have to travel? Wouldn't you like to not have to travel so many miles and miss all these holidays? I look around. I think about the castle. I go, no, I don't think so. I think I can handle traveling. All right. Now, if I was traveling and wasn't making any money, I don't think I could handle that. But that's not my problem. And the mic for... wait, please.
I had a similar situation. I just had my wife's videotape it. Bring me the video and I'll look at it.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but I mean, and that's why your spouse, your significant other, whatever you want to call, has to be part of the program to the extent that at least allow you to do the things you're going to have to do. If they're not, then it's going to be tough, tough, tough. Nothing's impossible in my mind, but it'll be extremely tough. Now, do we understand pay price to action? Okay. Now we're going to take a break, and then you're going to come back, and I'm going to ask you what you think your pay price to action has to be. We understand the pay price to action, and arguably could be the most important part of what I say. It's obviously the oldest thing since mankind began. Am I going to go out and hunt the saber-toothed tiger? What do you got under a blanket for? What the hell's wrong with you? Well, Reuben's hands are on top of the table, so, but that's what I first thought. Well, you got to one of the rich ones, Reuben. You're going in the right direction. I mean, yeah, okay. The arguably has been around since mankind. When they said, you know, they're going to eat. Am I going to go out and hunt the saber-toothed tiger? Am I going to eat or I'm not going to eat? The pay price to action was he went out and jumped on the saber-toothed tiger, and he either got eaten or he killed it. I mean, this is not a new concept, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it even goes beyond Mr. Ormond. It's older than Mr. Ormond. I mean, what's wrong?
Nothing.
So, it's an old concept, and most of the concepts that I talk about are as old as mankind. I mean, Napoleon Hill memorialized them, you know, in some respects a lot better than I try to articulate them. Okay, now, absence of evidence is not evidence of their absence. Just because you don't know anybody that thinks like I do, or has related these concepts to you like I have, just because you've never heard them before, I'm sure you have. If you've read all these seminar books and all that crap, you know, I mean, you've had to have heard some of these things. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The old question is, if you're standing in the forest and a tree falls and you hear it fall, you hear it fall. Now, does the same tree make the same noise if nobody's there to hear it? Yes. So absence of evidence is not evidence of their absence. Just because you're not there to hear the tree fall doesn't mean there's no noise. There are people, men and women, mostly men, that are shaking and moving all over this world of ours, doing exactly what I've alluded to the last 2+ days. I mean, there are tons of money being made in every industry that everybody represents, or profession, and/or profession. But just because you haven't been there, believe me, doesn't mean it's not happening. Now, that says one big thing. That means you ain't hanging around with the right people. Like my wife says, if you think money can't buy happiness, you don't know where to shop. My wife can show you. They don't send her things from Amsterdam and all over the place because she doesn't know how to shop. She knows. And I was telling somebody earlier during the break about how I get involved in companies, and I said the reason why most companies can't really afford me, and I said I don't want the money because it just reinforces how equity is important, because my wife can, in Rodeo Road, can spend more than my $3,000 an hour fee, easily, without even breaking a sweat. So if my wife can spend more than I can make an hour, I know I'm not getting paid the right way, if I'm ever going to stay ahead of it. So it's critically important, you know, this underlines, And one of the things that came out in your confidential questionnaires, it's obvious very few, no, not very, virtually no one in the room hangs around with, as they used to say, heavy hitters. I mean, it became blatantly obvious when you read through and the comments that were made, because if you had been hanging around with heavy hitters, you'd be thinking more like heavy hitters and you would answer the questions differently. Now, when I've had those questionnaires filled out by super high-performance heavy hitters, the answers are different. And they all revolve around the financial motive, as Napoleon Hill said, that was listed on one of the deals, financial motive must prevail. All the heavy hitters I know, to go back to use the term from the 70s and early 80s, I mean, the most important thing in life, short of death, is financial. There's no second. I mean, there's not even close. I mean, there's nothing.
Where does health fit in?
Only recently health has become more vogue because they want to live longer and because it's been proven that if you take better care of yourself, then you won't die. But guys don't even talk about health. I mean, they just assume you're going to stay healthy. That's why I Stairmaster and, you know, and they just assume that's going to happen. But they don't. I don't know any fanatics, real psycho fanatics on health that are high performance. And the reason why is, you know, most of these guys that are working 12, 14, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though they should take a break and go out run maybe for an hour or so, not many of them do. Michael Milken, I don't think Michael Milken did any physical exercise. You know, I don't think he did.
Jail?
Huh?
Not even in jail?
Oh, in jail maybe he did. But I mean, when he was out there running, shaking, and you know, in industry, I don't think he did anything. I mean, he did nothing. He just worked. He figured every hour he wasn't working was probably worth $1 million to him. Now, if you started acting as if every minute you didn't work or every hour it cost you $1 million, your attitude would change. You'd have an instant attitude adjustment. I don't care how much you like playing golf. I don't care how much you like cheating on your spouse. I don't care what you do in that time frame. If it was costing you $1 million an hour, you'd be doing a lot less of it. A lot less. Even you, Hoffman. But that's not how we think. That's because that's not how we've been conditioned, and because that's not how who we're hanging around with. The one thing I miss from Wall Street is because it is the center of greed of all mankind. I miss that. I miss the fire. Now, I was fortunate enough that I kept enough of it, even though I left. But that's why most of these guys live in New York. Michael Milken was an exception. They all live in New York. Virtually all of them. Warren Buffett's an exception. Everybody know who Warren Buffett is? Yeah. Warren Buffett is the second richest guy in the country, I believe. He's a Berkshire Hathaway, which was a private holding company founded back in the 50s with he took $1,000 investments or something from 100 people, and he's grown $100,000 into about, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 billion dollars since the 55. He is Graham and Dodd were financial analysts that came up with, you know, you don't buy companies with debt, you don't buy companies that haven't earned after-tax profit of 6 or 8 or 12% compounded annually for 10 or 20 years. They're called fundamentalists. I mean, you buy rock-solid conservative companies. Warren Buffett was trained by Graham and or Dodd, I forget which one, and he is the latter-day saint of fundamental financial analysis now. And he basically says he hasn't been investing in the public stock market in any great way for some time. He's been taking over, trying to buy into other companies, private companies now. And he's looking for distressed situations because companies are so highly leveraged, their earnings, you know, they're selling at 20, 30, 40, 50 times earnings, et cetera, so there's no fundamental buys anymore. But he's an exception. He doesn't live in New York. But I mean, there's a handful of exceptions, but the reason they're there is because they want to rub shoulders. And that's why I went to New York when I did in the early 70s. But I guess I had enough fire that I could leave New York and maintain the precepts that it takes towards that kind of commitment. Okay, so there are people out there, and it means that you're not hanging with the right people. And as I've said, structure follows strategy, as opposed to the way most people deal with their businesses. And this is important because a stumble often prevents a serious fall. And yet we're also careful in our business. We don't want to stumble. We don't want to do anything wrong. Well, what if I put out this new product? Or what if I did this? And it's better to learn how to stumble than fall down the toilet. It's better to trip over the toilet than fall in it. Yeah, I like that. Write that down, Laurie. Better to trip over the toilet than fall in it. Well, Peñaism was born. Okay, yet we've been conditioned all our life not to stumble even. You know, it's the old adage, you learn how to crawl before you walk. Now, I didn't learn how to crawl before I walked. I already think I told you. My mother held me on her hip till I was 3. As long as your troughs and peaks are higher than the ones before, your quantum program is working. Now, I see, this is what I think is the cornerstone. And, you know, who knows better, the people that come and listen to me or the guy that wrote it? I've already said, by definition, when you started your business or whatever, you were growing exponentially because you were starting from ground zero. Everybody understand that concept? Okay. Even the non-Harvard ones, you all understand, right? Well, I'll put it another way. Do the Harvard guys understand that concept? Okay. Burrow, now leave them alone, Burrow. Let them pay attention here. Keep your hands above the table. Okay. Everybody in this audience, especially you, Hoffman, focuses on, when you're in a peak and a valley, the distance that you've gone. You count your net worth and what you're worth from here to here. And then when you have a setback, financial setback, you figure how much you lost, okay? And you do that through life. When the important thing is, as long as your troughs, the setback points, are going this way, your program's working. The distance between here and here doesn't mean spit. I'm $40 million poorer today than I was a few years ago. And I could kick myself to death like a lot of you would. A lot of you commit suicide over that. But I don't focus on this, where I've come from the last point. I focus on where I'm going, because I'm up here in one of these troughs now. This is what's important. This trend, not this trend. And virtually all of our planning that I've seen, and I've never seen an exception to this. I mean, this is what the small to medium-sized corporations focus on. Now, when you see a long-term stock chart on the Dow or whatever, what do you see? You see the big time trend line on the bottom, don't you? On all those doofus programs on the Financial News Network and all that junk. That's what's important, not this. And everybody gets bogged down with this. The distance that you've come from here to here instead of the distance, and every time you do it, you know. If your troughs are continuing, and that's not such a great trough that I drew now that I look at it, but if your troughs are continuing on that angle. First company I built was a $2 million company. The second company I built was a $50 million. The third company I built was $400+ million, and then I had a bunch of companies within that I built up. At any point in time during those cycles, I had down short-term reversals. At any time. But I looked at the troughs, and that's what that means. If your troughs are higher than the ones before, your quantum leap program is working. And you know, just take, in some of these cases, I mean, it's if you were a salesman, and you didn't have a business, and you were just, you know, independent contractor. I mean, and you had a bad month, bad quarter. I mean, you can relate this any way you want to. Another way of looking at it is I focus on the glass is half full, not half empty. It's another simplistic way to say it. Here's the prime condition of success, according to Mr. Carnegie. Concentrate your energy, thought, and capital exclusively upon the business in which you are engaged. Having begun on one line, resolve to fight it out on that, to lead in it. I told you the story already that when I was in the refining business, I was making $14 a barrel, and instead of building 3 or 4 or 5 more refineries, what I do, I went in the show business. I really can't remember why I did that. I know I did it because I know I lost the money. I know I did it. I can't, for the life of me, tell you why in 1978, 79, why I didn't build a second refinery down there in Louisiana. Lake Charles, I don't know. I know I didn't know, that's what I know. And I know I lost a lot of money. I lost focus, you could say. And that's easily done. And as I've said yesterday, big companies that make a lot of money, they diversify, and now all those big companies get out of all the service, all the industries that they diversified into. And I don't know why I didn't make that refinery. God knows. The only man who never makes a mistake is the man who never does anything. And most of the people you hang around fall into this category. Never do anything. And that's all right. If you never want to do anything either, that's great. It's not great in my opinion, but I'm okay, you're okay, just like the book says. We ought to give that book away, you know, Lori? I bet you could buy it for a nickel now. Buy about 4 million of them for a nickel. Okay. Another important part of your planning. Peñaism. Plan for success. No backup plans, no ripcords, no fail-safes, or you will fail. This plan, this idea, the execution I talked to you about, you saw no space for contingency in there, did you? What if it doesn't work? What if I can't borrow the money? What if... No backup. If you plan for a B plan or a C plan, you will have a B or C plan. When I went public and when I've acquired these companies, and even the couple companies that have got ripped away from me in the last few months by some other people, I had no B plan. I had no B plan like when I was called and told that Merrill Lynch put a $15 million for 15% of the company, when I was going to take control of the company for $1,620,000, they said, well, don't you want to up your bid? And I thought to myself, what's this guy, an idiot? I was going to take control of the company for $1.6 million. Merrill Lynch puts up $15 million for 15%. Don't you want to up your bid? I said, what are you, a moron? No, I don't want to up my bid. I said, you know, I mean, just the fact that he would ask me means he's a moron. I would have fired that guy right away. You know, because there's always another deal. There are always more deals. And I don't have a secondary plan. Either the primary plan works or you forget it. Yes, sir.
Earlier you talked about modifying, but now you're saying don't change.
No. Now I'm talking about a bid. Now, there's nothing to modify on a bid. Okay, wait a minute.
Well, this modern equipment just drives you nuts. See, it says on.
Well, range is
Yeah, but it's mute.
Yeah, it's on. Okay. No, I'm not. In a plan, you have to continue to modify. But when you make a bid that's that diametrically different, 50.1% for $1.6 million, and some moron comes and gives them $15 million for 15%, there's nothing to modify. Forget it. Walk away. Go have a burrito or something. I mean, forget it. I mean, pardon?
Take the money.
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, buy my wife another necklace or something. I mean, forget it. I mean, that's not even... I mean, yet there will be people, you can bet your life on this, there will be people that change their bid. Because he says, I'll give you 5% for $1.6 million. I had 50%, now I'm going to get 5. I said, no, thank you. And then he called, you know, remember? Yeah, Lorraine was the one that was, pardon? Yeah, just last weekend. Now, and I mean, and of course, I got so much scar tissue now. Those used to bother me. Now, Mr. Whipple and I were involved in a deal not too long ago when some doofuses, purportedly Morgan Stanley, were going to come in and pay, what, $15 million more than we wanted to pay. We were going to pay $27 million. Morgan, and the 11th hour of, the 11th second of the 11th hour, they came in and said, we'll give you $42 million. I told Bruce, it's crap. It's not going to happen. This is Morgan Stanley's way. They come in on their name. They're going to take it. They're going to get an option for 60 or 90 or 120 days and then shop the deal. If they can't shop the deal, they're just going to drop it in the toilet. 60, 90 days later, and the wind was slightly taken out of Whipple's lungs, because he had to work over Christmas, and he didn't have to do anything. He worked over Christmas, and his wife got on his case, and his partner got on his case, and then when the deal dropped in the toilet, you know, Peña's crazy, blah, blah, blah. 60 days later, whatever, the gentleman that owned the company called Whipple up, or they talked again, and Morgan Stanley pulled out of the deal, never performed. This is the way the Wall Street does it. I mean, they've been doing it since Wall Street began, and the guy's now got his thumb up his ass. And so he wound up selling a partial sellout to his ESOP. He sold it to his employees, and he stayed on. But we got the deal ripped from us. But happens all the time. Now, in some of these cases, in the Merrill Lynch case, I'm sure because Merrill Lynch, who knows who I am, they used that to jack Merrill Lynch's deal up and get more money. So I mean, that's why there's a certain there's a reason sometimes not to tell who your financial partners are, because it excites the other side enough to up their bid. Now, no, I don't care if God came down or Trump. I mean, my bid isn't based on that, because I always know there's another deal. I always know there's another pretty girl going to walk down the street who looks hot. Mike, for the...
Back into that deal, when Morgan Stanley dropped it?
Well, as it turned out, the gentleman that was the founder, one of the 60% founder, he decided that he wanted to sell it to the employees because he could cut a better deal with the employees. He wound up selling 60% of the company for the same amount of money. I was going to pay 100% of the company. So, I mean, but that happens. It just happens. But you've got to have the discipline not to jump back in. And professionals have that discipline. Remember, the difference between a professional and amateur is that patience and persistence. I have the discipline because I know there's going to be another hot-looking fox walk by. I just know it. You know, maybe the same day. There always has been and there always will be. But when you're not accustomed to dealing in that arena, and that's why most of the guys get taken advantage of. You know, anybody that believes Merrill Lynch or Kidder Peabody, is an idiot. But they come in and they put you in the big oak room, and the room is longer than this room. And there's enough seats for 200 people, and they come in, and first of all, the young associates, the little doofus Harvard MBAs come in, Harvard MBA lawyers, you know, combination, they come in there, and they got their little, they all look alike, you know, they're all sitting there, and then the managing director will kind of stroll in, you know, about 20, 30 minutes later, and he'll sit down, and he'll say, it's got to be short. I don't have much time. We're closing a deal with Citicorp for $800 trillion. And then you know, you're sitting down there, you know, but it works. It's been working since time began. And I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how, you know, if you're not used to that, it gets to you. You know, it just gets to you. And I've been there so many times. I was the one that used to come in strolling in my previous career on Wall Street. But so when I was doing this with S.G. Warburg, who's considers themselves the creme de la creme of merchant bankers in the world, I used to do this. So they don't do that to me, or if they do it, they only do it once. And I say, okay, let's cut the shit. I've been through this regimen before. I wrote the book on this, so let's get down to business. But it works. And so you think that there's not another deal. You think that there's not another bank that'll give you the money, because you're inexperienced, you're scared, you don't have the confidence because you haven't done it, and you're not. And unfortunately, your lawyers and accountants and the people that advise you aren't much more experienced than you are at it. You bring a guy from, Electra, Texas, except for Mr. Ormond, because he's been through what I'm talking about. But you bring some little guy, guy that runs a one-room bank up to deal with Citicorp, unless he's a real good horse trader, and they got some good horse traders down there that don't have any education, I mean, you're at a disadvantage. So you're at that disadvantage. That's why hanging around with those kinds of people that have done this will make you feel more comfortable. There's no way to gain that experience, ladies and gentlemen. There's only two ways to do it. One, you got to do it yourself, make all the mistakes like I have, or you find somebody that's been through this cycle. There's only two ways. And I wouldn't wish the mistake way. I mean, because unless you're like Alexander Graham Bell and you're willing to do 10,000 experiments, most of you take a couple, 3 financial hits, lose half your net worth once, and then lose half of it again. I mean, you're not up to the plate anymore. You're just going to stay back there on the bench and just watch the balls go by, because that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just normal. I mean, and in my case, because I stood to the plate with somebody else's money first when I was on Wall Street, and I learned, and then I learned the game, and then I've also, doesn't mean I didn't strike out a bunch of times. Babe Ruth, leading home run, leading strikeout, right? And what by the end of the day, you will understand enough to know that you got to step up there, even though you may be dragging your bat, and not be real. You better be enthusiastic. You got to stand in the box, and you got to watch the fastballs come down from that movie. The movie The Natural. Remember? That young kid who pitched balls to Robert Redford in that final scene. And you got to know that you got to get the bat off your shoulder. Can't hit it just watching them fly by. You got to get the bat off your shoulder, and you got to step in and swing. And right now, most people that attend seminars don't understand that. They don't. You got to swing, and you got to swing with authority. And sometimes you'll walk back to the bench having struck out. But you've got to do it, and you can't. This is not experience that you can read from books. The book the kid from Solomon Brothers wrote that said everybody was a thief on Wall Street. Liars. Okay. How many read that book? A few. Dens of Thieves. Yeah. Liar's Poker. No, that's the one. Yeah, Liar's Poker. Okay. Just because you read that book, anybody read? I mean, if you think that's going to give you experience dealing with these guys, you're crazy. I mean, you just can't. I mean, it's like reading about a sexual experience and having your first one. Was it anything like you read about? Huh? What are you smiling about? Okay. It's just not the same, is it? No matter how graphic the words are, it just ain't there. Well, it's the same when you're sitting in that 120-foot table with all those guys down there. It's not the same just because you read Liar's Poker. Trust me, it just isn't. Unless you've got somebody sitting next to you that's been part of that Liar's Poker soap opera. It's just not the same. So we do ourselves an injustice because we don't equip ourselves properly to go. It's like going to, going fighting in a gunfight, you got no guns in your holsters. I mean, and that's what inadvertently most business individuals do. They go to a gunfight, or as Sean Connery said in the movie The Untouchables, just like a guinea wop to come with a gunfight with a knife. Remember that scene? I mean, you come to a gunfight with a knife. And that's, and that's because the people that you're hanging around with, or what's even worse, you don't even come to the fight. That's where most people are. It's not that you're coming with a knife to a gunfight. You're not even coming to the fight. And you've got to go to the fight. The example of the gentleman that hounded that poor guy for a job What's your name again? Mark. Mark. I mean, that's a perfect example of doing whatever had to take. Didn't matter. Now just think if you had done that when you're going through your planning, that you're willing to make that same commitment that I don't care what it takes, I'm going to do whatever necessary. I'm going to fly and follow, chase this guy around all over the country. And I'm sure he had, before he got onto this, this mission, and it is a mission, I mean, I'm sure he had other plans, he had other things he was supposed to, it didn't matter, he dropped them all. It's like Prince Charles when he got hot and bothered over Streisand yesterday, or the day before. He dropped all his plans for a whole day to go over and have tea with Barbara Streisand. Do you believe that? He dropped everything. Do you know what the future king of England drops all his plans? You know what that looks like in the English press? Do you have any idea what a moron he looks like? Or as they say, what a randy moron. He didn't care, because he was on a mission. And I'm sure, knowing Barbara, it was worth it for him. But that's the kind of missionary zealot I want you to become. Because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. And anything less, you're going to be doing detrimental stuff to yourself. It's going to be a detriment to yourself. Another pennyism, which we've already talked about, the more you investigate, the less you have to invest. I was told a story a number of years ago. I was trying to sell an oil prospect to a guy, and he owned the second largest bridge building company in the world. And it was called Johnson and Brown. And I asked Mr. Johnson what his decision was. He said, well, I'll have to check with Mr. Brown. I didn't see him for 2 years. We were at a dinner party, something for the royal family, and I went up to him. I said, we can never get back to you. You never took our calls, etc., etc. He said, Dan, that was just a polite British way of me saying no. I said, well, what did Mr. Brown say? He said, Mr. Brown died over Dunkirk in 1943. This was 1988. And he says, I investigated the deal and I decided that you didn't have enough expertise as a company to be drilling those kind of wells. Which he was right. We didn't at the time. We did a lot of things we didn't have enough expertise. If I waited around to have the expertise, I'd be still waiting. But yet I convinced the Israelis. Have I told the Israeli story here? Well, in San Diego, but I'll tell it again. I convinced the Israelis 10 years ago. I decided that if I found oil in Israel, I would be able to raise so much money from all the Jews all over the world that I would have to hire guards just to queue people up that were going to give me money. So I finagled for a year, and I got an invitation by Minister Modieh, who was the then Minister of Energy, who was a lawyer. And we went back to Israel, and Charlie and Mark and I, we flew TWA, $3,300 round trip both ways for us. We hired a high-priced consultant for 10 grand, who flew to New York first class, Concorde to Paris, rested 2 or 3 days at the Ritz, then flew to Tel Aviv, and we met him there. His ticket was 10 grand round trip. So we got in and we're making the presentation, and it's hot, hot, hot as hell, and we're wearing suits and they're wearing short-sleeve shirts, and Minister Modieh, I get through the presentation, he said, Mr. Peña, we've had Superior Oil here, we had Arm & Hammer here the day before, we had this, why your little company, Great Western Energy, should we do business with you? And I jumped up, and with all the enthusiasm I could muster, I said, with the greatest respect, Minister, when I jumped up, all the bodyguards jumped up because they didn't know what I was going to do. I said, do you know the difference between chicken shit and chicken salad? And he looked, and it seemed like an eternity, but it was only 6 or 8 seconds. And one of my partners was Jewish. He just kind of rolls under the table. And I said, you've been dealing with a chicken shit, and I am the chicken salad. He laughed, and he said, I believe if anybody can find oil, he can. And he turned to the PhD, Elazar Barak, who was a MIT PhD and a 2-star general in the Army. And he says, do the business with Mr. Peña. Okay. And so I convinced them where I didn't have any experience. So I convinced a lot of people. So just because Mr. Brown tells me, or Mr. Brown and Johnson tells me, if I had waited around for that experience, I then got the Orthodox Jews to sign on the Sabbath, 10, 11 o'clock at night Friday. which everybody reads my book and says that's impossible. I said, well, I got pictures. I mean, I know I got him to sign on the Sabbath. And because they try to negotiate, they try to get me to stay over the weekend till Sunday, and I knew I had all the leverage then, and so I went to the airport in my car, and they had the police bring me back. They thought I was bluffing. You got to know when to bluff them, when to hold them. That was a big bluff for me, because we needed that business like we needed blood in our veins. And but on the way to the airport, I kept on asking Mark, "Do you see any cars behind us? Do you see any cars behind us?" He says, "Dan, I don't see a damn car." And I said, "Oh God!" And I'm going about 10 miles over the speed limit. I didn't want to slow down too much, and so then just before we got to the airport, police cars got in front of us and pulled us over and said, "The minister wants, you're not allowed to leave yet." Yeah, and we signed the deal, and we signed it on the Sabbath, and as it turns out, the Lebanese War broke out, and I say man plans, God laughs. Lebanese War broke out 10 days later. The $63 million they were going to give us, they had to give it to the army to fight the war. No, we never, I came back to the United States because I kept on saying, I'm going to make it happen anyway. And I had I'm trying to think of the big Jewish club in downtown Manhattan. I had a big deal. I had the founder of Solomon, or Fibro, who owned Solomon Brothers. I had all the B'nai B'rith. I had everybody. I had room. And then, and we were using Landsat satellites, the laser deals up in the sky to find oil. And this is new technology, doesn't work, but now I know that. I didn't know it then. And all these guys were saying, and I was trying to explain why there was no oil in Israel heretofore, and all around Israel there's oil. And then you talk to the Arabs, they said God knew what he was doing, not giving the Jews any oil, Dan. I mean, there's a reason why. But I mean, it's because basically if you turn this chart like this, the ground flaps underneath Israel, and the crease takes all the oil away from them. That's very simplistically. I mean, that's why there's no oil in Israel to speak of. There's not to speak of. There's none, period. And so I was out there trying to raise money, not believing that. I thought the Lebanese War was going to be over. I didn't believe it. And then after 5 or 6 months, it became obvious that even with my enthusiasm, I wasn't going to get the war over with. I couldn't, you can't plan for unplannable things. So I just, I spent quite a bit of money, but I just licked my wounds and moved on to the next deal. Then I decided I'm going to get the Kuwaitis, and that's what I did. And the Israeli says, when you go to Kuwait or Saudi, you got to take this page out of your passport. I got a new passport, didn't take the page out. And I just rolled over, just like nothing happened. Since I'm an expert on this geology now, I mean, Kuwait's just right over here. I just flipped it around, and now I'm a Kuwaiti expert. And I did, and I got $400 or $500 million out of him.
For exploration.
Exploration, that's correct. That's what helped build Great Western. Can we have the mic, please, for this gentleman?
Probably kind of trivial, but why did you have to take the page out of the passport?
Because the Israelis and the Arabs don't like one another too much. And those, of course, now they're all bosom buddies. Everybody kissing everybody. When I saw him kiss Arafat, Rabin, I almost had a heart attack. Because I said, I'll never live long enough to see that.
Kuwait?
Pardon?
You said in Kuwait?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all those countries. Yeah, they hate each other. And now they're kissing each other on TV, but I'm sure that Rabin went and washed his lips right after that happened. Yeah. So, but I mean, but see, what I did is and it was a hugely devastating thing to our little company at the time. I said, God, where can I go? How can I use all the money and all the expertise? Got to be the Arab countries. And who did I go to? I didn't go to the weakest link, because the Kuwaitis are arguably the smartest investors in the Middle East. The Kuwaitis are arguably the smartest investors in the world. So, where am I going to go? Where they got the biggest pockets. Not where I got the littlest pockets, where I got a bank that's got a $500,000 lending limit or something. I went to where the pockets were as deep as, the center of the earth. And then what happened, though? Saddam Hussein, the prick, he went and invaded in 1990 and knocked my whole deal apart. I had built the whole... Now, who would have thought... Who could have planned for that? Nobody. Although I got accused by the shareholders up and down that I should have known. Nobody's closer to the Kuwaiti government than you are. You got all their money. Nobody told me. I didn't know they were lining up on the damn borders. I didn't know that. But I mean, the whole deal changed. And then ultimately it was the end of my demise. 19 months later, the Kuwaitis said, Dan, I think it's time for you to retire. And I didn't retire right then, but I mean, that's what happened. So I mean, it not only changed the company's life cycle, changed mine. So if now thinking like some of the people in this audience think, now if I hadn't gone to the Kuwaiti government and got all those $400 or $500 million and put them in my pocket, I'd still have a job.
Get more unemployment.
Yeah, and if I had done that, then what do you do with a shareholder that you want to fire? I mean, it all became moot. But at the end of the day, it was better for me to own 15 or 20 or 40% of a $400 or $500 million company than it was to own 100% of a $10 million company. I mean, there's no question. But you automatically, by definition, when you go public, you lose control, almost always. And almost always, that's the beginning of the end of your management because you're going to get thrown out.
But who cares?
That's exactly right. But to some people in this room, it matters. See? But I mean, just, you know, and I ultimately had to fight for my money, but I mean, so I fought and I won. But it doesn't matter. If the big picture, if landing on the moon is your goal, if not landing on the moon and it's celebrating Cinco de Mayo or being home for Hanukkah, then, I mean, all this, you can just take this and, you know, wipe your backside with it. But, I mean, this is virtually all these guys think this way. Now, the people problem vis-a-vis doing your plan is you've got to sell your dream and you've got to, by definition, let go of part of it, and that is give part of your company, part of your deals away. Another way of handling it, and this is the way the Bass brothers did, but pretty smart, because they're cheap guys, Bass brothers. Smart. Richard Rainwater, who worked for the Basses and took the Bass brothers, or Bass family, from $400 or $500 million net worth to $10, $12 billion net worth over a period of 10 years. The Basses would give you pieces of the deal, not pieces of the holding company. That's how Richard Rainwater got to be worth $400 or $500 million, and then he hooked up with Rick Scott. So there's a lot of different ways to cut the pie. But you got to give away. That's the part that you still got to do. Now, the Bass brothers arguably, why should we give away part of our holding company? It's our holding company. Well, that's fine. So they set up a bunch of other companies. And everybody that was there got a piece of the deal. And it's very similar. Like the Mosbys, I'm not going to give them part of the holding company. Contrary to, I don't believe they thought that. If you did, let me clarify it here on public record on TV. See, so there's different ways to cut it. So, but you've got to sell that, and you've got to get rid of that pride of authorship. Don't be trapped by it. And engineers and scientists are really tough on this pride of authorship. Can we have the mic, please, for Ruben in the back, please?
Thanks. Right there about pride of ownership and giving away a piece of it. I'm glad you made the distinction between the company and the project you're working on. How do you know? Someone asked yesterday, how much equity do you give away? And you looked at him and said, well, how much money do you want to make?
That's correct.
If the project, in terms of the project, how do you know? I guess common sense, correct me.
No,
Dan.
common sense doesn't. You never know. You do.
How do you know what they're worth, is what I'm saying.
Well, you never know. You know, I know because I've got a gut instinct because I've done it a jillion times now. But the first time I did it, I didn't know. But, I mean, most people for having to put up no money, make no guarantees, have no risk to get 5 or 10% of a deal that you're excited about will kiss your ass out in front of this hotel and give you a week to draw a crowd.
Does that mean they'll like it?
Yeah. Now, a lot of times, what I do is when I'm going to do that, let's say when I'm going to put up money, and even though the guys are poor that are in the deal, I make them put up the equity of their house. Not that it means anything to the deal. You know, sign over their cars to me, because I want them to be focused. Because even though he doesn't have any money, he loses his cars and his house, his mom is going to eat him alive. And guess what? They do it.
Yeah, that's another question in terms of the focus, even if the enthusiasm.
Here's the guy that lives by the radio, you know?
And the funny thing is, I couldn't, even without the microphone, I couldn't tell.
Okay, go ahead.
The enthusiasm, even if the enthusiasm is there for them and you know what they're worth, should you be, you want them there, like you said, focused all the time. So you don't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want people who are dabbling in your project with a bunch of other projects. You want somebody...
No. Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't covered that. You don't want dabblers. That's an excellent point. You don't want that. You want people that are just focused on your deal. And if you've sold your obsession right, by definition, they're obsessed. And by definition, your project is now their project. If you haven't done that, something's wrong. You want them to be consumed. You want them to walk your talk, which will become their talk. You want them to be able to say, that's why when, you know, they say, you know, I'm partners with Dan Peña and this is our project, but, you know, you want them to be able to say that. It gives them more credibility. It makes them feel better about themselves. And again, the foundation to excellence is self-esteem. And it's all part, all this thing that we're talking about is a big web. You know, they're all an integral part. But it's, the reason you give them something, when was the last time anybody was ever given anything for nothing? Can anybody answer me? Do you know how unusual that makes you? Or how they say, how special? It separates you from the riffraff scum that permeates business. It makes you a big hitter instantly. It brings you from the bowels of humanity to where halo. Now maybe I should have made that more clear. That's one of the reasons you do it. The best reason is because it works. You know? I mean, just think the last time somebody gave, you know, I mean, really gave you something for nothing. No, I'm saying, jumping up and raising it. It doesn't happen. You know? Unless they gave you the clap or AIDS something, maybe that was for nothing, you know? Huh? Yeah, I got a punch in the mouth for nothing a number of times. But I mean, and if you go over to Virginia, you never get anything for nothing. I mean, we're going to send this to the board of directors, Craig. Could I have the mic for this young man here? It just separates you. It makes you, and I don't like to use that word special because it just gags me. But, I mean, it makes you special. It makes you different. Because there are just not that many people that do it. You can count them. There's 50, 100 guys in the country. I mean, that's it. Yes, sir.
From the standpoint of a time frame, what would you say is the time frame that you allow someone to show their worth in that situation without screwing it up?
Just a moment. It's not that I can't answer the question. Okay,
or is there a
please?
guideline to that? Is there a guideline that you use as far as determining whether a person is worthy of the investment you made in them by giving them a portion?
I don't know if I haven't really looked at it that way, but I'll tell you how I look at it. It's slightly different. The people, for the most part, with one or two exceptions that I've given equity away to, are people that have represented me, lawyers, accountants, etc., that I brought ultimately in-house and made them my partners. And so I've seen them perform. Another universe of recipients of equity are people that have already been within the company and perform there. So it's then against the performance benchmark. Now, notwithstanding those two examples, I have also, and just recently, I think the Mosbys are a good example, and a couple of things I've done recently, where I haven't really seen a performance, but I'm basing it on my gut instincts, and my gut instincts are almost always right. And I told you, you know that movie, Star Wars, Let the Force Be With You. Obi-Wan, what do I do? What do I, when he's got that sword, that laser thingamajig. I mean, that's true. That ain't just in the movies. It's for real. I mean, I don't call it the Force, but I mean, my instincts are right on. And so I've done it the other times just based on my gut instincts, that I know, I feel good, and I've been occasionally wrong, but it's in de minimis. In the cosmos of time, it's de minimis. It hasn't meant anything the few times I've been wrong.
I have one more question. When they make a mistake, do you...
And they will.
And they
Trust
will.
me.
Yeah. When they do you make a determination whether they'll go to the next level and whether you want to continue on with them at that point, or
No.
do you give them a certain amount of chances, or?
Oh yeah,
how does that
no.
work?
I'd say next time, let's say it's you and me. Next time, what are you going to do next time? He said, well, I know I did it wrong this time. Next time I'm going to do it this way. Fine. You can't have it a one-shot deal where you're going to land on them. Great performers, in football drop the ball once in a while, or throw it out of bounds by accident, when they should be hitting the guy open in the flat. No, you'll have an instinct. I mean, if he drops the ball or she drops the ball a bunch of times, then if they have value in the organization someplace else, you put them there. If they don't, then you have to make that decision, and you jettison them.
And it gets back to what we were talking about yesterday. If you have to get rid of them and they've got all this equity, what do you do?
So what?
No big deal.
It's no big deal. It's just... See, what you're really saying is you don't trust your own judgment. That's what you're saying. That's another way of saying that. You don't trust your own judgment. I'm going to make a mistake. If they're going to... you got to expect them to make mistakes. You got to expect yourself to make mistakes. And what you're really saying is you don't trust your own judgment. You don't trust who you hired. You don't trust who you have decided to be in business with. That's what you're really saying. That's the real fear factor. But see, I have no fear about losing in court. I never have. Someday, maybe, ain't happened yet, been a lot of years, someday some slick lawyer is going to get a hold of me, maybe down in some regional court down there in West Texas, where my juice doesn't count. That's why I stay in big cities, New York, Chicago, Houston. I don't want to get down there sideswiped by some little guy from, but I trust my instincts. I trust my decision-making prowess. You have not had anywhere near the experience in making decisions. As I said when this thing started, I've made over 50,000 business decisions. You know how many that is? That's a lot. And I'm not talking about pencils and what kind of stationery to buy. 50,000. I mean, a whole bunch of them. And you can't make 50,000 without making mistakes. And I've told you I've got near 20,000 business mistakes that I've been wrong at. And the every strip center, when I was in the construction business, I made about probably 5,000 right there. But they gave me the demographics for the strip center we're going to put in. The thing was a bomb. So that's why gut instincts, how you feel about somebody, it's that old thing when it's hot or she's hot or he's hot, it's hot. They're hot. Normally, you like somebody. You get good vibrations when you're around them the first time. That's why I keep telling you, it's so important. You only get one time to make a first impression. You only get one time. You don't get two times to make a first impression. And we, as individuals, don't take it seriously enough. We just don't, and it's a difficult concept to get kids to understand. You look like a pig. You hang around with pigs. You talk like a pig. You must be you are a pig. You know, and you know, it's like, you know, my kids, you know, one of my sons has got a friend with an earring. I said, he comes to the house, I rip it out his ear. It's that simple. Okay? Yeah, I know. Okay. Okay. I don't care. And I know, you know, you come home with green hair, I shave your body, including your privates. You come with hairdos, you're only going to do it once. Just once, and my kids know. I said, if I ever find you have anything to do with drugs, I said, I will beat you as close to death as humanly possible, and then I'll put you up as a ward of the court. That's it. There are no. And my kid believes me. When I was a kid, my father, heroin, they didn't have cocaine. He says, Dan, there's only one cure. Oh, I didn't bring my gun today. Anyway, there's only one cure. There's only one cure, and that's a bullet in the head. He used to take the gun and put it and pull back the hammer of his .38 and put it right there. There's only one cure, and it's a bullet through the brain, and I'll be the that does it to you. Guess what? I believed him. And guess what? The drug culture that I should have been part of, I missed. It never even dawned on me to do anything. When people tell me, I said, you traveled overseas during the 60s, you were this. You never got into drugs? Nope. Didn't even dawn on me. My dad was serious, and he would have. There's no doubt in my mind he would have. And so my kids believe me. My kids, you know, and because, I mean, there's certain things, but I have this experience that you don't have to make a decision when you're going to have to throw somebody out. I've done it all these times, and so that all high-performance people do it all these times. You know, one of the things I haven't really said, we're going to get into it later, is that joint venturing is the quickest way for the average person to make quantum quantum growth. Joint venturing. If you remember, you know, I went to Leggett, which was a huge billion-dollar company, a private company, Abilene, Texas. They became my special limited partner. Nobody remembers that they were my special limited partner. I had all the liabilities. Nobody realized, you know, I was a senior partner with the Japanese, and with the Kuwaitis, I was the managing partner. But I did it through joint venturing. Finding somebody that had the requisite qualities or assets, and normally that was money, not so much expertise. Joint venturing. And by definition, joint venturing is, you know, you may not both put up the same amount of money. When I work with companies, we're joint venturing, I'm putting up my expertise normally, and or my staff, sometimes my money. But, I mean, it's joint venturing, and for you to make these decisions, it's, you know, it's find a mentor that's done it before you, that's got that is more comfortable, or joint venture. My first joint venture was with the federal government. At that time, I wanted the deepest pockets with the most inept management system that I could find. I went directly to the federal government because I knew. I just gotten out of the military. I was a career military officer in my first career. I knew how inept they were. They couldn't get any smarter by the time I just went back to school 2 or 3 years. They couldn't have got any smarter in just 3 years. And they didn't. So, I mean, joint venturing takes a lot of this mystique out. Doing it with somebody that already has. And if, you know, I don't like to put it this way, you know, until you got the experience. You don't really, see, I know you don't need the experience, but a lot of you in the room, I can just tell by the looks on your face, you think you need the experience. If you think you need the experience, ladies and gentlemen, you need the experience, because perception is reality. If your comfort level isn't there, then believe me, somebody sitting across the table with infinitely less experience than me is going to see it. And then just eat you alive. And then what happens is then your whole investment career, your whole business career is going to be shaped by something that you made a mistake. And I use the example about my father. And my kid brother's not here. My kid brother doesn't like to hear this. So that's why I didn't say it yesterday. My father's whole life, he's 76 years old, is revolved around two things he didn't, one thing he did and one thing he didn't do. In 1956, 57, 58, he had the opportunity to buy the corner of Topanga Canyon and Ventura Boulevard. All four corners for $3 grand. Okay, now, the last time he didn't. Last time I checked, or not last time, the first time it rolled for 640,000, and 800 and some thousand, and 2,000,006, and then 4,000,008, and $12 million last time, when you add up the four corners. Okay, he didn't make that investment. My dad doesn't even like to drive down that end of the valley now. That end of the valley doesn't exist to him. It's like in a time warp. Then he invested, instead of that, he invested $10,000, all the money he could borrow, in the Lucky 13 uranium mining company. Because you know, we were going to all die from A-bombs, and you needed uranium, and you had bomb shelters in your backyard and all that stuff. And it was a fraud. Oh, no, it was Nevada. It was a fraud. My dad has not made an investment since. Most people, their whole lives are based on, they stuck their head out of the turtle shell one time, they got it clipped, and they never brought it back out again. That's my father. Vince doesn't like to hear it, but he says, geez, you know, just think what it could have been like. And in fact, Vince says, my dad used to beat me. What my dad did to me was child abuse now. And then when Vince came along, he was older, and he more tired or more mature, whatever, and so he didn't beat Vince quite as much. And then he didn't beat my baby brother at all. My baby brother's a bum. And Vince was the youngest fire captain. He's not a bum, but he said, just think if Dad had beat me with boards like he did you, maybe I'd be a billionaire. And you know what? And I agree. All these high-performance people, most of them, led very disciplined lives.
Dan, would you sold the property at a small margin anyway?
No, because my dad, the things that he does own, he's owned forever. See, so he probably still own it.
You get him the confidence to buy more.
Probably, you know. He could have gave me some money or something instead of a smack in the head, you know. But the other side, if my dad was sitting here right now, he'd say, I have no idea why Dan is the way he is. He's an enigma in our family. We don't understand him. We don't relate to him. And very few of us associate with him. If he were standing right here or sitting here. And it's the truth, I don't. I am like a Martian. Now, part of that is intentional because I don't want to be around them. I don't want to hear negative shit. You know, I don't want to hear, you know, and in the Hispanic community, they stay in those little dumpy, you know, going uptown from where I live is if you live in El Sereno, you know, or Hacienda Heights if you really hit the big time. For those of you that are from the LA area, you know where that is. But I mean, it's, you know, it's nothing. And I don't want to be exposed to that. I don't want to hear that stuff. I don't want my kids hearing it.
Not just Hispanic either.
Well, I know, but I understand that, but I'm more of an expert on that. But in the African American community, it's the same thing, you know, same crap. Yeah, and that's why I don't have anything to do with them. That's why the guys from Harvard, the Hispanics, and when I tell them, the first time I told them that, I mean, and these are smart guys, I mean, they look at me, because they know in their gut I'm saying is right. But the first time they heard it from somebody, you know, as forcefully as I talk, just like many of the things I've told you in the last 2+ days, it hurts because to make a quantum leap, ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting to my conclusion way ahead of myself, but this is important since we're on this trend. Some of you in the room have got to say that you've pissed away a lot of years. That's a tough, tough, tough thing to do. Easier to do when you're younger, when you haven't got that preconditioning. But to make that quantum leap, to hunt with them big dogs, you got to say, maybe I've been screwing it up. Not maybe, I have been screwing it up. It's much easier for a young 26-year-old woman to say, well, I'm done with this business and my shit. I'm out of here. It's not so easy. I'm 48, I'm 53, I'm whatever the hell I am, and to do this, because you got to suck them up tight, because to adopt this methodology, basically you got to say, everything I've been taught has been wrong. I followed wrong methodology, and I'm considering myself a bright guy, so maybe I am a moron, doofus. I mean, you got to go through all this. That is extremely hard. It is possible. I mean, it happens all the time. And God knows it's rewarding. Believe me, it's rewarding. I mean, I think Burl will attest to, you know, it's a lot more fun doing $5 and $8 and $20 million deals and $10,000, $15,000 deals. I mean, there's no comparison. And Burl, I'm not taking anything away from Burl because Burl's a smart lady, but I mean, she ain't that smart. She's just not. Nobody's that smart. You know, so you have to make that commitment. You don't have to do anything. You know, I would submit to you that you should make that commitment, and and a lot of people have. And it's easier, not easier. It's as easy as it can get because I'm a person that has made the commitment and it has been there. I'm not telling you something I read in 800 books. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say this, and I don't get embarrassed about hardly anything. I've only read 3 or 4 books in my whole life. My whole entire life. I read Candy twice. Does anybody remember Candy? Candy's a book about a nymphomaniac that basically screws her hunchback father in the last page. Give me the hump, the hump, the hump. I read that book twice. This is true. I'm not lying about this. Okay, because this tape is going to, you know, forever. Okay, I read The Life and Legend of Che Guevara, who my dad allegedly assassinated when he was in the CIA. My dad was an assassin hitman in the CIA. I read The Life and Legend because I wanted to know what kind of guy my dad had purportedly wasted. And more recently, I read Lee Iacocca's book, his first book. And, of course, I've read Think and Grow Rich. And I've read Release Your Brakes by Jim Newman, and that's about it. And I've thumbed through at my 6,000 words Rubin's book, and I've thumbed through those books I really read at my 400, 500 word pace, but I've thumbed through maybe 15, 20 other books since I learned how to read as quickly as I do. And I told you, maybe I didn't, my wife reads at 12,000 words a minute, excuse me, upside down. She can read a book backwards. No lie. Like this. Just about this fast. Backwards.
You go to school for that?
Yep. We both did. In fact, I one time was going to have the guy do these seminars, and we had 2 test markets in the Valley. Some very bright friends of mine that went there, and they were so uncomfortable. Lorraine was there. They couldn't believe it. I got it. Linda got it, and one other person got it in the room. The other 15 or 18 or 20 PhD, psychiatrists, Jim Newman, rocket scientists, lawyers, couldn't, no matter, you know. Linda, it works. It really does. I can tell you. What was the guy's name? Stracker. Ed Stratcher. I mean, he did it. I mean, I've done it. And I remember the psychiatrist that was there, he says, this is bullshit. And I said, well, how come I can do it? He said, Dan, you just think you can do it. And I said, Linda outlined the book. She outlined the book, about 5 pages, all the salient points, backwards, upside down. And he said, well, she's obviously read the book before, she just doesn't remember. This is what the psychiatrist told me. And I said, Carlo, no, she didn't. And then we give her a finance book, a book on finance, and Linda go, sip to it. Now, to the extent my kids are supposedly geniuses, even though they get in trouble all the time, I think they got their mother's genes more than mine, because I'm not that smart. I'm just not. But see, we had a group of sophisticated people that couldn't accept this. And Jim Newman is an open-minded guy. Jim Newman focused in on the fact that he tried to explain how the neurons, when you look at something, I guess it's upside down when it's taken back into our brain. Okay, well, this system supposedly, and Jim says that's crap. But I mean, you know, I can put you in touch with them. I mean, it worked for me. It worked for my wife. And can you imagine he's been trying to sell us the Xerox and IBM? You know how far he's gotten? I mean, they laugh when he shows up. You know, they just now it's been more successful with kids because kids don't have that preconditioned. Kids, you know, he's gotten kids to be able to read real quickly. But Linda, I always said when we were going to college, Linda's been a space cadet all her life. She's been out there in the twilight zone her entire life, you know, and I guess she really has been because she just picked up to it like it was brushing your teeth, you know. It was nothing because he told her that your mind, you know, like when we look at a room, does your brain say this leaf, when you look over here, this leaf has got lines? And no, you're taking big snapshots, aren't you? Well, your brain, according to his theory, is the same thing on a page. You look at the page, it doesn't matter which way, it's a snapshot. It's going to feed the information in. Linda believed that. Should make sense to me. So she did it. Now me, I believed a lot less, but I still could do it. Because and the guys were teasing me, said, I was outlining the book, and he said, Dan, you'd recognize Rolls-Royce or billionaire upside down or sideways. I mean, what's so great about that? Because I was reading a book about the richest guy in Korea, the book I did it to. Why don't you do it on a book that you know? And so, but then I did do it, and I still did it at 4,000 or 5,000 words a minute. But it's getting back to changing the way you think about these things and getting your people to believe like you believe, and your plan will grow so quickly, exponentially, that you won't believe it. Okay, it is now 1:45. We're going to take 45 minutes for lunch. When we get back, we're going to talk about working capital, how you get money for your business, how you grow internally, how you grow externally, what's the best way. Now, I forgot to ask you that. I haven't forgotten that question I was going to ask you, remember? Yeah, I didn't forget that. I just wanted you to, I want some food to throw up when I ask it. I want you to toss it up on the table. Doing? Huh?
Michael Van. I was just getting good, too.
Jesus, Hoffman.
Oh, really?
You know what?
Well, I guess
You
I'll
know,
get a free one, too.
when you got enough net worth, it warms you.
They used to say you're a winner.
Oh, really?
And he's rich. I mean, he's not one of the ones dealer in the continuum, but if you had double your net worth, it'd be a little warmer.
Dan, did you ever tell this group about meetings you used to have with the temperatures?
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't really. The temperature thing. I'll talk about that. Okay, before I talk about that, though, one of the born doofuses in the audience, a little more high profile. Yes, Raul, I am going to take credit for it. Where's Raul? He's not here? He left? Okay, this is Ruben, who's sitting back here. This is tomorrow's Times, LA Times, the calendar section. And this is the guys, his partner. You call them partners? This guy was, this other guy, this black dude that has the co-host with this show this popular show that he runs or co-runs or whatever the word is, and and one of the bit of advice, we had dinner a couple 3 weeks ago. The thing that I told Ruben, in addition to, you know, notwithstanding his Harvard education and stuff like that, and the fact that he's already written a popular book and it's been published and all this, my advice to him was, vis-a-vis what we're talking about here, being a high-performance person, is that he's got a trait that is difficult to develop, but he seems to have it naturally. And I had the same trait when I was in my middle 20s, and I've made a lot of money off my trait, and I would hope, and I know that if he devotes his time with great passion to his trait, and his trait is the gift to gab. He's very good, he's very articulate, and he's not afraid to open his big mouth and let his lips flap. And he can make a ton of money off that. I once had a guy I worked for when I was selling real estate while I was going to graduate school, who told me, he says, Dan, as long as somebody doesn't cut your tongue out, you're going to be super rich. He was right. That was Kelly Norwood, who was a disbarred Bolt Hall lawyer who was my sales manager when I first started selling real estate. And it's this kind of exposure that will help Ruben, given the guidance if he chooses, and I'm positive he's already decided to follow some of these precepts. Otherwise, he wouldn't be hanging around me. You know, I can't get rid of the kid. He's like the clap. You know. So, but that's good. That's a good that's a good problem. Any questions about anything that we've covered so far? Mike. Oh, Mike's here. Ladies first, okay.
It's not really a question.
Well, then,
I just wanted to interject something about happiness. I know that I put that on my form.
Yeah,
and
I know
think
you did. I'm not going to forget it either.
But I think you can achieve happiness because I know that that's what will make me happy.
Yeah,
I
well,
would not be happy at home, all comfy, and letting someone else go out there and have fun. So my view of happiness is what would make you happy. So it's an individual thing. And I don't think that you would be happy either at a 9 to 5.
Yeah, it's still a doofus question, and you gave the doofus answer. So irrespective of that bullshit you just went to. Okay, next.
Throughout the 3 days we've been here, you talk about hiring all these Harvard guys and stuff like that.
No, I haven't. I've hired a lot of them, but I mean, but that does. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of your question. Go
okay,
ahead.
well. What's your feelings about hiring college educated? I mean, is formal education important to you?
No.
When you...
No. Mm-mm. No. All things being equal, and we already know that's not true, but all things being equal, I would rather have a guy or a gal. I haven't found too many gals with it, but a guy that has tremendous commitment, tremendous discipline, tremendous passion, and him be smart. It's nice if he's got, you know, an MBA or a PhD or he's a medical doctor or some, but it's not mandatory. It's nice. It's not a requisite for success, because the guys that were the Edisons of this world and Fords, I mean, they had 4th, 5th, 6th grade education. Some of them didn't have any. Andrew Carnegie. I don't know if he had 9th grade. I forget what he had. He didn't have, but very little. So the answer is that burning desire, that fire in your belly is much more important. People that have a more refined intellectual side can make it perhaps slightly easier to make great amounts of money. Because, you know, it's better to be a smart person and have a fire in the belly than a moron, you know. It's just that simple. But, I mean, it's not absolute. I don't look, well, I used to look, but I don't anymore. You know, like, I like MIT, I like guys, not MIT, I like West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy. I like Academy guys. You give me a Harvard, Stanford, guy with no education, everything else being equal, I will pick the Academy guy every 100% of the time.
For what? Discipline?
Discipline, because, I mean, this is no question. I mean, they have a fine education. They prove they have the desire to put up with a lot of shit, because they whip you like a dog going through the academies. They don't whip you like they used to, but they still whip you pretty good. A lot worse than these other schools you go through where, you know, they don't whip you at all. I mean, plus, you've got a lot of training in leadership, which I've already said is very important. And I'm partial to academy guys. I'm partial to military background guys. It's like there's a young man that I've identified who is a MIT West Point graduate. That's an awesome combination. And he's 38 years old, and to the extent I get in telecommunication, this kid's going to be my CEO. I mean, and when I called him on a deal here, this deal that Merrill Lynch stole away from me, I hadn't talked to him in a few months, called him one afternoon. I said, can you be here tomorrow for a meeting? He says, yes, how early? I says, can it be early, Mr. Peña? I go, why? He says, I'm having president with Pac Bell tomorrow, lunch or dinner with Pac Bell in San Francisco, and I need to go to San Francisco. But you've got me until I got to get on a plane. This at the last minute. He dropped everything. I forget, it was his 4-year-old's birthday party, and he just dropped everything. And then as it turned out, Merrill Lynch stole the deal from me, and so the meeting never happened. But I mean, that's the level of commitment and discipline I like. But other than that, you give me a guy that's got a high school education, or you give me a guy that's got a college education, doesn't really mean any difference. It doesn't.
So where do you look for them in any one place? You bump into them and
No, they seek me out. I mean, it's like lepers. I mean, they seek you out. I mean, obviously the seminar is the circuit that I'm on is a conduit for a certain amount of them. The fact I taught college 1 year when I first left Great Western, and I met one there. The Harvard guys, I met one Harvard guy, and Harvard, it's like eating juju beans. One Harvard guy, and then you got 2 Harvard guys, and you got 3, and then pretty soon they're all over you, So I've got a whole handful of Harvard guys on my back now. I found the Mosbys at a seminar that I didn't give. I found one of the Mosbys, and then the other Mosby came along. Kind of like AIDS, it's just, another venereal disease. It's kind of latched on to me. But the thing that I look for isn't so much education. The thing that I look for is perseverance. The thing that I look for is commitment. I think I said this yesterday. We had a boy, John Mosby, he was going to get married, and he came a few days before his wedding. And I don't really remember how much there is in preparing for a wedding, because I didn't do much preparation when I got married, but my wife did it all. But I know it's a fairly heavy commitment to come just a few days before you're getting married. But he didn't ask me to change the meeting. Just how long you think it'll be? I said, I'm not sure. That's I think what I said. And he was there, and I think he was thankful that he was able to get back a couple days before he got married, though. But he never mentioned it to me. So I look for that level of commitment. And then I give a lot of doofus tests. I ask you to come fight traffic both ways if I can. Saturday nights, Christmas Eve, on your 10th anniversary. Cancel your trip to Vegas. I like to see that level of commitment, because you can bet your sweet ass, if I'm committed to you, I'll do all the above. Won't make any difference. And I want to see that same level of commitment, because, see, ladies and gentlemen, when times are easy and everybody's making money and everything's happy, everybody loves one another. When the shit hits the fan, I want to see how far, there's a thing that kids, they call wedgie. Is that a wedgie when you pull your underwear up? I want to see how much of a wedgie the guy or gal is willing to take. And so what I try to do, and I'm pretty successful at it, is to see how much of a strain I can put them in beforehand. Because, Lorraine, if she's here, I guess she's not right now, can tell you, I can see one person every 15 minutes, 365 days a year. I got no shortage of people. What I do have a shortage in which every high-performance person that's looking for other people that he can help be high performance or help his organization be high performance, it's a shortage of people with commitment. That's a big shortage. And it's harder to find that level of commitment when somebody's got a certain degree of success. Medical doctors, it's difficult. They made their commitment, and they're already Jesus Christ, and they can already walk on water. I mean, attorneys, accountants. I don't know why engineers should have their head up their ass. I don't know how hard it is to be an engineer, but it ain't that hard. I was pre-engineering. I even got accepted as college as a pre-engineering major. And if I got accepted with a 2.55 average, I was one step above an amoeba. So I always wondered why engineers would think they're such hot shit. It never ceased to amaze me. But I'm looking for that commitment. And it's like in the movie Wall Street. How many saw Wall Street with okay. You know who that movie was about?
You?
Me.
I was just telling my friend that you're Gordon Gekko.
right I am. And proud of it. The movie was about me. When that movie came out, I got more phone calls from every place in the world. Jesus Christ, Dan, have you seen the movie yet? I go, no, what movie? It's a movie with Michael Douglas. It's about this Wall Street cutthroat son of a bitch. And I said, no, I'm going to see this movie, though. And I went to see it. In that scene where the fat trader comes in and is talking to me, he says, we got him good this time. Remember that scene? Actually, Douglas should have done it because I used to do that all the time. I used to stand up on top of the trading desks with a bullhorn under my arm like in a submarine. Dive, dive, ooh, ooh, running around. And in fact, my former young colleague, who I helped groom, if that's the right word, is sitting in the back of the room with Bear Stearns. The young man with a mustache with a shit-eating grin back there right now, and he's still with Bear Stearns, and he's very successful. And my lifestyle very much paralleled that movie. Fortunately, I got out of the business before I got in trouble, right, Sherrod? Yeah, just a little trouble, but I slipped by it. But it's that level of commitment that we're looking for. It always is. I mean, anybody tells you any different. Now, with respect to good formal educations, to become a medical doctor, you have a big level of commitment. To go through some of the tougher schools in the country, you have to have a level of commitment because they're harder. To go on and get an MBA, you have to have a level of commitment. To go on and get a PhD, you have to have a level of commitment. And so that's why big business looks at those backgrounds and say, well, at least they had the level of commitment to do this, this, and this. That's the only benchmark. They can't sit down and go through all the crap that I've gone through with you people the last 2.5 days. The interviewing process would take forever. They never get anybody in a school. You never hire an employee. The level of commitment. You know, when I got the Award of Merit for from Sports Illustrated in 1977, for semi-athletic, I ran 1,052 miles in 1 month. You know, and I ran 100 miles the last 20 hours. Athletes are making tremendous levels of commitment all the time. But, I mean, and all I did is I took a level of commitment and I turned it into making money. And, but that's what they're looking for.
I have another question. How do you know if an industry is at the peak of its cycle?
If I knew that, Sherrod. I mean...
well, you made the comment yesterday, you know, get out when the elevator's at the top. And
yeah, well, I mean, you try to the best you can. I mean, nobody knows when it's at the top for sure. I mean, the bull market's been running, I don't know, 6 to 8, 10 years, something like that. I mean, it's been a long time. And I mean, historically, the average bull market's, what, 36, 39 months? Something like that. I mean, so we're 2.5 times past the average for the last 100 years. You don't have to be a Harvard MBA, I mean, to figure out that we're towards that end of the continuum. So, I mean, that you should use as a benchmark. I mean, you know, stock guys that are in stocks and equities, they already know that. You use as a benchmark the level of IPOs, initial public offerings, the kind of crap that's coming to market. You know, and 5 years ago, it was probably a higher quality company coming to market than today. You look at the multiples, the ratios for the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones companies. You know, at the bottom of a bear market are listed at 4, 5, 6, 7 times earnings. Now they're at 25, 30 times earnings. I mean, these are just simple benchmarks. Now, you know, some of the people on Wall Street try to make it sound much more esoteric than that. But I mean, that's simplistically, that's it.
But that's for the market. I'm asking, like in an industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, within the market, there are these various industries. There's telecommunications, there's healthcare, there's oil and gas, there's banking, there's financial services. You look at each one of them. Now, because of the super highway and telecommunications, you're probably going to get more stretch on that. Because of healthcare and what's happening to the healthcare industry, you're going to get more stretch on that. You're going to be able to make more They're going to be higher multiples. You're going to be able to sell companies at higher levels because of that. But certain industries, you know, that are in the doldrums right now. Southern California real estate is still in the doldrums. I don't know if it's purportedly turned around or not. I don't know. I don't care. You know, somebody told me my house went down in market value. I think $3 million. My house here in Los Angeles, and you know, whereas a lot of people in this room, Craig knows because his house has gone down in value, I believe, not quite as much as mine, but it's gone. It does. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, unless you're in the business of buying and selling houses. I mean, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, you know, you make some adjustment on your net worth statement, or your accountant does. I mean, but it doesn't matter. So, but you have to. You can look at these general trends, and I don't read specific things on economics. I read general trends. I know real estate in Southern California is kind of in the hole. Probably be a good time to buy real estate, I would imagine. Although that's not what I do. I don't buy.
It's always a good time to buy real estate.
Yeah. Mr. LeGrand says it's always a good time. He's made a lot of money in real estate. I haven't. You know, the only real estate I basically have had, you know, I've got roughly basically $20 million worth of houses, but I don't have any real estate. So you have to look at those kinds of things. There's somebody else that's Mike for Jim, please.
Where's Jim?
Down at the back.
Well, kind of along the line of what he was just talking about, it's any business publication you look at, it's not hard to figure out if they're all talking about the same thing. There's your upcycle, like right now it's casinos. You know, Midwest just passed it. They're all over the place. If I had a casino, I'd be out of it now, because this is certainly an upcycle for something like a casino. But you know, anytime you look at a business publication, the easiest way I know is whatever Citicorp says is hot, it's time to get out. Things like that, because
There's the next Citicorp man.
Yeah, they're dead ass wrong. And they are. It's the truth. You know, and so if you can find something like that, that's the easiest way to do it, and just kind of find where you fit in that group. You know, whether it's travel or, you know, real estate.
Okay. Any more questions about that? Okay. Now, I've had this up all day again. How does this apply to me, and how do I take action? And before I forget, you're trying to do too many things. I'll get back to you, but you're trying to do way, way too many things. You've got to narrow it down to 2. But I'll get back. Okay. Now, you have this in your dealie, right? No. Are they? No, well, they shouldn't be. Unless because I started using it now, they decided they don't want to do business with anybody that I know. There are 135 sources that make money available to small business firms. Of this list, 41 are banks, 94 are non-banks related venture capital firms. Because you know, as I said yesterday, I'm asked all the time, where do I get money? Where do I get money? When I needed money, I just called on a jillion banks, knocking on all kinds of doors. And I would submit to you that that's what you should be doing.
When you say banks, Dan, you don't mean just like bank, Citibank.
No.
That might have a dollar.
No, I mean like the Equitable Bank, Danvers Savings, Commercial Bank of San Francisco, M&I Bank, Union Bank and Trust Company, Truckee River Bank. Truckee, that's in someplace in California, isn't it? Now, Battery Ventures Limited, BCM Technologies, CP Ventures, CW Group. I mean, there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of financial institutions all over this country that lend money on doofus projects. Now, see, now maybe intuitively you know the reason you don't make all these calls is because somebody's going to say yes. And then when they say yes, they're going to say, okay, you got to sign personally. Whatever little chicken shit net worth you've got, you got to put up. You got to put your equity in your home, and you got to put your balls on the line. Now that's why I think a lot of you don't make those calls, because you don't believe enough in the deal. I've done it. I've rolled my entire net worth 5 times. Everything I owned. Now I can't roll everything I own because the castle and all that stuff is in a trust. And when I was begging for money, when Great Western had me by the throat and had me in a constructive trust, I couldn't write a check. I went to the trustees, O'Melveny and Myers, my good friends at O'Melveny Myers, and I asked Solomon Cam, who's the trustee, I said, Sonny, I said, I need to take $3, $4, $5 million quick. I need it like yesterday. That's too bad, he said. I said, what do you mean it's too bad? He says, Dan, you're not trustee, I am. And it's for the kids. I said, what are you talking about? I mean, what's the deal here? And he didn't give me the money. Now, in hindsight, I'm glad he didn't. Even though I won the trial. Made me just be a little more creative how to, you know, get money. But nobody on the Hill knew that I was tied up financially. I couldn't write a check for $50. My lifestyle didn't change. Kids still went to private schools. Didn't sell any of my cars. Didn't go to any of my doofus neighbors. You know, 40 IQ neighbors to borrow money. I doubt that anybody, very few people in my neighbors could write me a check for $3 or $4 or $5 million cash anyway. So, I mean, I didn't waste much time calling them, hey, Craig, who can I get $5 million cash by tomorrow from? I didn't waste my time on many phone calls like that.